Hello, today I'm talking with Sabina, a self-pres 5 and an
Yep,
INTJ in the Myers-Briggs system, and we are talking about creativity in the Enneagram. So
right.
tell me, what does creativity mean to you?
I never thought I was a creative person. And I think I've embraced the fact that I actually am in the last 5 years or so as I've been moving through more of my self development. But creativity for me is less about, my mother's an artist. So I used to think it was just about art. And I'm like, oh, I'm a
Mhm.
crap artist. Like, I can't do that at all. But I am great at crafts and design ideas and even just um, thinking of creative ways to tackle a problem. So it's become a much more rich and fluid thing than just like creativity is being an artist, which is what I used to think. So I don't know if that answers the question, but it's all sorts of different avenues for um, being a thoughtful, open to possibilities kind of person.
Yeah, and I think I still hold that stereotype that creativity is only for artists as well. And I mean, my form of creativity is painting, but
Mm.
it's trying to sometimes dislodge that immediate association between creativity and art making is difficult. Like it's really stuck in there.
Yeah.
Um, and so so 5 years ago, would you say that you sort of had a cognitive shift that you started to define creativity differently, or did you start craft and art making and that practice or process shifted your understanding?
I think it was the COVID stay-at-home quarantining stuff that was like, what do you do with yourself? You're here
Mm,
24/7 for however many months. And I started getting into all sorts of things. I've always been a knitter, but I've never considered that a creative outlet. I just always considered that a problem-solving outlet, or just like from A to B, like just finish something. But it's absolutely a creative outlet. And the way I do it is creative because I never follow a pattern fully. I always have to sort of think outside the box a little bit and do my own thing. So um, that became much more prevalent during COVID days. And then I was like, oh, what if I did get into art, but I don't know how I had to do it in a way that my mind could embrace it, which was paint by numbers. So I got into paint by numbers, and I did like countless. I'd send a photograph that I really loved of my dog or something like that to a company, and they would send me back a thing, and I would just be able to paint something that I loved the outcome of it and was able to hang it up. And then other people saw that and they sort of commissioned me for free to do work for them. And I did. And everybody got a Christmas present. It was a paint by numbers painting of them in my family, things like that. And then even like with workout routines, and I just started, I guess it was the COVID years that got me thinking about creativity differently, because I was filling my days with, even doing puzzles was a creative outlet, or um, God, there were so many different things, and I can't even remember half of them now. But and so I started to embrace myself more as a creative person during that time. It was like, I do creative things. A lot of these things are things I've
mm,
always done throughout the years. I just never gave myself credit for them in a creative way.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that was my next question. When you look back over your life, you've always done creative things. It was just you hadn't attached a label to them or gave yourself permission to say, I am creative or this is creative.
Yeah. And the comparison thing, I'm much less about comparison now, but back in my youth, certainly with a mother that was an artist who
Mm,
did all sorts of different creative, whether it was photography or sculpture or jewelry making, or that was another thing I did, jewelry making, um, or actual painting, that I would compare myself to her and be like, wow, I'm not an artist, I'm not
mm.
creative. But I was crocheting back then, and I mean, I was creative in my own ways, but I never gave myself credit for it.
Mm. And as you think, as a 5, you'd be very comfortable with complexity thinking and coming up with new ideas in that sort of way. How have you seen that on reflection, maybe in your work, in that more professional space?
Again, I think it was in the way. Um, Initially, for not being able to embrace my creative side, because it had to be, creativity had to be in a box. It had to be a
Mm-hmm.
certain way. It had to exist and look and feel and follow a certain pattern. And so that limited me greatly with that's not creative, that's not creative at all. So my five logistical mind was very uncreative in that way. It wouldn't let me be a little looser around all of this. And I think as I've been doing my stretching towards sevens and eights and doing my growth work outside of like intellect and more into body and embracing feeling a little bit more and being more comfortable with all of that, it has loosened my idea of what creativity needs to be, needs to be. It can be anything, really,
Mm-hmm.
including how I've grown my garden, which is I love roses, and stopping and smelling the roses is a creative thing. It takes you into the present moment, and enjoying the flower and the smell of the flower and growing them myself is creative. So that was, initially when I wanted to tackle gardening, it's like I need to understand every single thing about gardening before I start. But that's never going to
Mm,
happen. That was a big kick in the gut. It's like you can't understand every single thing about gardening before you start
mm,
because there's a constant learning curve. You're always
yeah,
learning, you know. So things
always.
like that would kind of like challenge me of like, no, you can't read the guide before you dive in. You have to just dive in.
Yeah, and just give it a go.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm curious. I know that sometimes fives have a vision of what they want things to be. I'm thinking about the garden.
Mhm.
Did you find that you had a vision for what it was, and then, but because you couldn't create that easily, that stopped you? Or,
No, it was, I wanted to know everything
okay.
before I started. Like, okay, if I like this type of plant, does it need sun? Does it need shade? How much watering does it need? If I want it to be this color, like what kind of soil does it need? Because some of them respond to acidic soil versus alkaline soil. Da, da, da.
Right.
Like, I can't even start before I know all of that. And then I was like,
Right.
never mind. Just say, I don't want potted plants. I want them to grow in the ground. Okay, you can do that. I like hydrangeas and roses. Let's try that. Well, hydrangeas have never worked in my garden, so I had to pivot at some point. But that was something I learned as I tried it instead of
Mm,
learning all about it beforehand. So no, I had to actually just get in
okay.
there and start, and that probably took 2 years for me to embrace that possibility. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Just looking
Yeah.
out there like, oh, I have to start my garden someday. I have to learn more about it. And then if I don't do it at some point, it's never going to happen. So let's just do it, you know?
So it was 2 years of thinking before you started to play and experiment and
Two
dig some
years of
soil
thinking I
up.
have to learn everything about it before I can start.
Right.
And then, nothing happens.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
yeah. Mhm.
Well, I really like, I love that COVID gave me that opportunity to start to change that paradigm and
Mhm.
to explore this side of yourself that was always there,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
hadn't had space and permission.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people struggle during quarantine, but for a five, it was heaven to spend so
Mm,
much time by myself and, um, just literally do whatever I wanted with my time and space. I had oodles of it. And that gave me permission to start moving through the world differently and evaluating myself in that movement differently,
mhm.
instead of chopping up my day into parcels and this is getting done now and here we're going grocery shopping and we're only buying what's on the list and blah, blah, blah. And I was always here, but this was so much freedom and so much space and time that I had the luxury of, that it was like, oh, I'm feeling different in this. And
Mm,
that was not here anymore. That was, oh, I want to feel this some more, or oh, I don't like that one. Let's not do that again, and really sensing in a way that was new because I had the luxury of it as opposed to having to conform to time constrictions.
I'm curious as to this shift that's happened in your personal world in terms of the
Hmm.
gardening and the painting and bringing more experimentation and play into that. How has that shifted, if at all? Maybe it hasn't, your professional work. Like, has there
Yeah,
been
you
a
touched
shift?
that before. I would say so. Yeah. I mean, I haven't really thought about it and how to articulate that, but certainly I am much more present I'm a
Mm,
therapist by trade, so I'm much more in the moment with my clients instead of in evaluation or assessment. I'm just feeling into the client's experience a lot more. So having an understand, certainly the Enneagram, learning about the Enneagram has helped me so much with this. Like just
mm,
understanding that depending on someone's type, they're having a whole different experience than I am in that particular moment. So really being much more aware of that and allowing for that, and getting out of my own limitations around my fiveness and understanding all of that, that is just my particular
mm,
um, filter through which I see things and experience things, but that's not everybody's experience of a moment. So that's helped. And then, of course, as you learn certain things, techniques like the Enneagram, I can bring that into my work, and it enlivens and refreshes the experience of working with a particular client, and they get to see things through a new filter as well, and they get to
mm,
understand themselves differently, and that sort of energizes the experience in a new way. So
mm,
um, I don't know if any of that is creative per se, but I feel like it is. I think
mm.
it's experiencing a moment in a new way feels like a creative or spiritual even um,
Yeah.
you know shift of some sort. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Experiencing the moment in a new way feels creative.
Yes.
I think
That's
that's a
me.
really great way to phrase that. That's, yeah, a really important point.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. And you've mentioned quite a few of your creative projects, your garden, uh, everyone's Christmas presents being painted photographs of themselves, which I love. I'm like, oh, I might take that idea and run
Go
with
for
it for
it.
next Christmas because I am a terrible gift giver.
Uh-huh.
But which of your like creative projects are you most proud of?
Ooh. I don't think that I can define that. I think that it goes in stages depending on the phase of life I'm in, maybe. Um, I'm super proud of my career, and I think that that was an ambitious, intellectualized, creative experience. Um, but that was 20 years ago, right? So I've been, um, what is my proudest creative? Right now, it's travel and
Mhm.
allowing myself to really be in my seven and experience adventure and allow for spontaneity and allow for creativity in creating a travel plan and creating experiences that are new to me. And I think that I'm certainly proud of that right now. I was mentioning to you earlier that I did some skydiving for the first time and I've learned how to scuba. And those are things that I can take into my future, like um that's a whole new way of existing. It's not just creating a new way of seeing a moment. It's I like expansion, right? And that
Mm.
feels like a creative experience to me. And I'm super proud of expansion. Like what's the point if we're not all trying to be in a space of living more fully?
Yes.
Hmm.
Yes, I love that. I really hadn't expected you to say travel and the scuba diving and the skydiving, but they really are creative experiences in their own way, not just for the moment they're in, but how they shape you in the future.
Mhm.
That's
And
great.
even just planning it, being able to come up with a travel itinerary and a plan is a creative experience for me, at least. I mean, it
Mm,
uses intellect too and having to research and look at things, but it's also about um, what do I want to experience? How do I want to feel in these moments? If I give myself an entire month to travel, what kind of experiences do I want to have? And immersions do I want to
mm.
go through?
Oh no, I love that. I'm so glad you shared that because I wouldn't have thought of that, but absolutely it is,
Yeah.
travel planning is creative.
Mhm.
How do I want to experience that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, I think that's all my questions. So is there anything
Okay.
that's come up in your mind about creativity that you want to add before we wrap up?
The only thing is, especially given your reactions to some of my answers, is like, I don't know again if this is how other people would experience creativity, but it's how I'm receiving creativity right now. And having you kind of bring it to my awareness, like creative energy and my experience of creativity has sort of illuminated that a little bit. So I appreciate that very much. And I also appreciate the ability to think on it and um, really sort of give myself credit for the journey I've been on around creativity and also where I am in the moment with it. So I appreciate
Mm.
that. I don't know that other people would see the way creativity the way I see it at the moment, but this is how I'm experiencing it and I'm embracing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'm noticing, and I haven't obviously finished all the interviews yet, is there's some real strong themes between the way the sexual dominants describe creativity. And I'm going to assume there's going to be similarities, but I haven't spoken to enough self-pres and social. So I really appreciate you sharing your particular perspective because that'll help me and others discover, is that just the self-pres 5 perspective? Is that the self-pres perspective? Um, because I don't think we talk about creativity enough and what it
Mhm,
is because we're so busy talking about it as are you innovative in running a company or are you an artist? But
mhm, mhm.
there's so much more to our creative experience
Yeah,
because we're human. We are creative.
yeah,
And so
exactly.
just exploring it.
Yeah, yeah.
So thank
I,
you.
you're very welcome. I appreciate this.